you for joining me here today. We're going to talk a little bit about your journey to adoption, and I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you. So the first one of those is how you decided to adopt.
Since I was young, I'd always had an interest in friends that I had met along my journey, whether it's at school or on my street, that had been adopted. And I always found it fascinating how I'd met one child that used to come to my riding stables that was in a children's home, and how difficult life was for him because he didn't have consistent members of staff, a parent figure in his life. And I remember feeling a sense of empathy for him, even as a young child. And then later on, I started to work in children's homes as I was at university. And I, again, found it really upsetting to see teenagers get through life so far without having a consistent foundation from a family perspective. So family to me was the vital part that these children were missing. And I always felt that when I'm older, if I could, and if my family were kind of at a point where they're stable enough to manage change in dynamics, then I would love to have opened up our family to the possibility of adoption. So my husband thankfully was on board as well, and we started the journey once our children were 5 and 7, and that was 3 years ago. So they were at a good stage in school, and we could see that their needs weren't above and beyond kind of what capacity we had for them plus another. So we felt it was a good time, and we applied to the Northampton Family and Children's team and started our journey with them.
And so how did you find the application process?
The initial application was quite straightforward. There was some paperwork to be done, and it was a matter of getting that back quite promptly. We were assigned a social worker quite early on, and she was great. She came out and kind of explained the process really clearly, and it was a smooth journey, the first part of it. So stage 1 with all of the paperwork was very much smooth. I would say stage 2 got a little bit more complicated because we had adopted a dog, and that then delayed the process by 3 months because they needed to see if the dog was settled. But however, we didn't really anticipate it would delay the process by 3 months, which was a bit frustrating, but we understood the reasons why, to make sure the dog was sound and coped with the change that in its own entirety. So that went fine. The dog was approved through the pet assessment. And then sadly, our social worker went off sick just before panel. So our team manager stepped in for her, and she was fantastic. She picked up our case really quickly, came out to visit us, got us through panel, and intermittently helped us in stage 3 as our social worker was a slight off a little bit, but then also she then resigned. So then the team manager supported us until we then had a more permanent social worker.
And how did you come to be matched with your little girl?
Originally, we were looking to proceed with a little girl who was 3, out of county. We'd found her on Linkmaker, and we'd got to the point of meeting her once, and we were due to meet her for the second time with our 2 birth children. And then sadly, just that week, her case went back to court because her mum was contesting and wanted a reassessment. So that journey was really quite painful and was a big emotional roller coaster. And so we effectively started over again. And sadly, at that time, there wasn't a huge kind of flow of children through Northamptonshire as such. So I was frantically looking on Linkmaker, and I'd seen this little one that we've got now. This was about 3 months after the court contestant of the other little one. As soon as I saw her, I knew she was absolutely wonderful, and I thought my husband would think the same too. So I messaged the adoption social worker through Linkmaker, and the ball started rolling. It started to move quite quickly. and we got to the point of meeting her on her first birthday. And as soon as we met her, our hearts melted. We couldn't keep our eyes off her. She was just the most beautiful little thing. And she really captures people's attention with her smile and her very adorable nature. She's a very warm child. And also, just from a kind of practical point of view as well, we really liked the foster carers too, because we got to meet them obviously in the first meeting. And that was something that both of us always wanted, that we could have that continued relationship with the foster carers for the little one's life story going forward. So that went well. And then we got to the stage of being able to proceed towards panel. Sadly, it got delayed because the birth mum had got some questions about who the paternal father was. So we paused, and that put us back about 3 months again, whilst DNA tests were being done. Obviously, that's a very worrying time because we're not sure which way it's going to go. We'd kind of started to fall in love with this little girl. And obviously, at the same time, our social workers telling us not to, get too invested, and everything's quite fragile still. We were very close. We were very prepared. We'd done so much paperwork towards her. We'd put in so many reasons why we thought we were a good match for her, and likewise read reasons why the social workers thought we were good family for her. So it was a real challenge and a test of our kind of emotional regulation really through that. Could we keep our nerve and not just kind of throw it all in really? But anyway, we did, and we got through it, and we were very proactive where we could be. So this little one was on a traditional adoption placement, but because of the delays with the DNA testing, that gave us an opportunity to push towards a foster to adopt placement. Thankfully, we were already approved, which really helped to speed things up, because we felt that because we had lost 3 months for such a young person's life, 3 months is really significant. There's a big difference between their attachment, their development, their language, their awareness of the world, and we felt that time was of the essence. We worked really well with the social workers on both sides, our side and her side, and thankfully the foster carers had a holiday planned which didn't include the little one. So we used that as another kind of opportunity to push for foster to adopt, because it's not always straightforward to change from adoption to foster to adopt. There has to be some really good reasons why. And there was enough reasons, and we pushed for it, and thankfully got her in, which would have been about 6 weeks earlier than she would have had we had to wait for another panel date. And although 6 weeks doesn't sound a lot in theory, it feels a lot when you've already been waiting and had 3 months worth of delay anyway. That was a godsend, having that ability to do it. The foster to adopt was slightly more intense than the traditional adoption would have been, just because we had another social worker added into the mix, which was the foster to adopt social worker. So it felt like we had social workers coming out of our ears. They were all perfectly pleasant and lovely and supportive, and we just did our daily notes. We would liaise with that social worker for her daily notes.
What is the sort of difference of being an early permanence or foster adopt carer?
So foster to adopt carer, you're acting as a foster carer in a way. So effectively, you do need to keep a track and record of what you've been doing with the child. So what groups you've been to, if any, or how's the emotions been that day, what's been any concerns, or if they've had a bump or a fall, especially at toddler age. So recording the positives, how things are going, but also any hiccups or any feedback to the social worker so they're aware of. You also are not really supposed to be at that stage called mum and dad too, which is a big change when you've got birth children already calling you mum and dad. Thankfully, at that stage, the little one didn't have a huge amount of words, so she wasn't really demonstrating that she was kind of picking up mum or dad from the boys as such. And we didn't make a big deal of it. We kind of had 6 weeks worth of kind of not obviously going mama dada dada, and so we just let that one kind of just be quite gentle, really. That part just felt a little bit more intense. And then as soon as she was back to an adoption order after the panel, we had one less social worker to liaise with. And it also then reduced to maybe weekly visits to begin with. It felt very regular. I can't quite remember. And then it's reduced now to 6 weekly visits from 2 social workers until the court order has gone in. The appointments have slowed down and life feels like it's getting a good flow. It's nice having them because you can bounce off ideas and discuss support if you need any. But at the same time, when you're trying to get into like a rhythm of going to like baby groups or social events, sometimes you have to then just rearrange your diary around the busy social workers that don't have as much time really as you do.
How have your birth children adapted to the situation?
They've done very well. I think the waiting was probably harder than actually her coming, because they kept saying, you know, when the DNA difficulties came up, they were just saying, well, mummy, why can't we pay for the DNA tests? Why do we have to wait for a panel to approve the funds for the DNA tests? Why are we having a delay like this? And you could see their frustration. And they said, but it just means that she's not going to have a mummy and daddy for a lot longer now. And so actually their hearts were feeling the burden of the waiting as well. And we were quite transparent with them the whole way through because they're we're quite emotionally stable children that can kind of manage with the uncertainty. But at the same time, it was frustrating for them and sort of worrying. And then when she arrived, instantly she would charm them. She wouldn't hold my hand to walk to school. It had to be their hands. She would cuddle them and do a dance every time they come down in the morning. She sits on their lap to read stories with them. If she's hurt, she'll get a cuddle off of them. So little things have kind of won the boys over very easily because she's incredibly adorable. Also, she was in a foster placement with 2 foster boys. The boys already modelled how to be a sister, effectively, a little sister. So she knows rough and tumble play, and she knows that sort of the sharing of attention with the caregiver as well. So she's coped really well with that transition, and I've been so proud of them in how well that they've coped. And I think as well, what both of us have seen is a real value of their characteristics coming through that we wouldn't have seen without the adoption. So I've never seen them nurture and been gentle and caring because with each other they just have rough and tumble play all the time. But with her, they cuddle, they dance, they hold hands, and they're at a stage where they don't like to do that with me anymore, but no, with her they will still do it. And they're very proud of her. Whatever kids ask in the playground, is that your sister? They get very proud and they'll give her a big cuddle, and it's been really heartwarming to see the change that it's had on them in a positive way. And I'm sure there'll be difficulties to come, but it's early days, and at the moment we haven't seen any negatives from their perspective. We've not seen any jealousy, because I think as well, because they've always had each other, they've had shared attention. We've got a good support network around us, so we've managed to keep all their routines the same. We're getting to football clubs and beavers and cubs and all of that stuff, at the same time as me managing the little one's bedtime routines and her needs for consistency. So pulling off the network has really helped, so that everyone's need for consistency
can be met. What have been the highlights of your journey so far?
There's an overall sense of joy that we've just had coming through. But I feel the moment wherever we go to pick up the boys from school, little one will go down to the window, and as soon as the boys come out, the joy and the excitement that she has in her body when they come out, And then the smile on their faces kind of just gives me so much happiness to see that she feels connected to them and us. And also they feel a sense of love and sort of enjoyment that they're getting from having a new little sister. Because I guess that would have been our biggest concern, is how the boys were going to cope was the unknown. So seeing how well they're doing has been the biggest highlight, I would say.